We're going to talk about some alignment procedures today, just basic alignment procedures. Is something that we like to go over. And last time we talked about what? Remember what we talked about last time? We talked about angles, didn't we? We talked about the catcher, the candor, the toe, and all that. And so, the first thing we're going to talk about is alignment equipment. All right. So, you know what we're doing, and some of you guys have done alignments already. But what you know is you're shooting across the front and the back, and from here to here. So you might also notice if you get something in between here that blocks that beam, you're not going to be able to, it tells you that it doesn't have good readings on that side. Now the other day when we were doing alignment, the battery in one of the heads went dead, and so we had to put it back all that charge up. I may have to change the battery in that one, but it usually provides information on a computer screen that guides you through the alignment process. Now in that machine out there is an expert mode where if you know how to align tires and you don't have to be told how to go through it, you can actually go into expert mode and it'll just go in there with the idea that it doesn't need to tell you nothing. All right, and you've seen these things right here, they put those on. Now a lot of times whenever you're mounting these things on there, there's ways that everybody kind of puts them on there the way that it looks like it's okay to them. Some of them grip around the outside. Some of them, the ones that's got the little knuckle on them are supposed to be for your stamped steel rims that go on the inside, believe it or not. But always put your bungee straps on there so that it just doesn't fall off. They basically, that machine that we've got back there came with rubber bungee straps. Now some of the other ones, they just initially started when you put those on there, people use bungee straps so that to protect their investment, don't have that problem. But you also might notice that the one we got out there, if it can't see underneath the car because there's something in the way, or maybe the car is sitting too low, you actually have a way on the screen, if it can't see it, it'll ask if you want to lower the probe rods 45 degrees. I mean, not 45 degrees, 45 millimeters, or 75 millimeters or whatever. That way it will be able to see under there. Something I told you all the other day, if this frame here is tall enough on that one, because it's made to work to do some pretty big tires, like 22s or whatever. If you find yourself doing a small car and this is trying to touch here, what you got to do is you got to put this on there so it's going sideways. In other words, where you're gripping the wheel, you can put that sideways and it'll still work. You don't have to, make all kinds of extraordinary, I think Zane, the little pointer on my turn plate, he bent it out of the way when he was working on it one day just because he got irritated. Of course, that's Zane. Okay, now you got a computer that uses 4-wheel sensors with cameras. This one right here has got cameras on it. You close the doors, you'll get better readings because I got the windows tinted and the light confuses the cameras over the way the machine's mounted. Okay, there you go. That's another little color picture of that. Now, you guys have used this before, haven't you?
Lots of times.
Yep. And what happens sometimes whenever you're setting it, if you put that steering wheel holder on there, and whenever you pull the steering wheel into the center position, and it's sort of bound up or something, and then you put this on there, and then you set your toe, what happens after you're done?
Steering wheel's gonna move.
It's crooked. It didn't move. You put it in the middle, but it was bound up a little bit. So basically it's all about having everything where it wants to be, where it's loose, where it's not pulled over there and bound up one way or another. Because the irritatingest thing in the world is to get through with an alignment and go down the road with a crooked steering wheel. Now you got to come back and put it back on there because customers ain't gonna like it. It just drive you crazy. Are you one of them kind of people that straightens a picture on the wall? Imagine if you go back from getting a wheel alignment, and all of a sudden when you're driving straight down the road, your steering wheel's canted at about 20 degrees. That just drive you up the wall. And it's got to do with this adjustment right here. All right, the wheels you can set on a turn plate secured with removable pins. Now, one of the things that we like to do when we're pulling the car up on the lift is we pull it up there and we stop it just before we get to those turn plates. And you all know that you leave it in neutral, you push it, grab the wheels and push it onto the turn plates so that it's just sitting on the turn plates, but you don't drive it onto the turn plates and then hit the brake and have bing, turn plates doing this kind of stuff. So after you roll it on there by hand and you put your wheel chocks, in front and behind the wheel, you pull them pins out right then. And then you're good on that. So those wheels have got to be able to float. If you're doing a rear wheel alignment, the big plates in the back, you got pins you remove on those to be able to float too. Now, whenever you're doing ride control stuff, now there's your fuel reset button, but you're not going to be concerned about that as much as you are your air ride. If you've got air ride, how many of you guys have ever had a vehicle with air ride on it? You like the air?
First time hearing it.
I've seen it like in Lincoln Continental.
Yeah, them bags, them airbags. Have you seen Lincoln Town cars and some of the
Lincoln
Crown
Town
Vics
cars.
and stuff squatting down in the back real bad?
Mhm.
Because the airbags are leaking.
Yep.
And what you can do to get rid of that nonsense, if you don't wanna pay for new airbags or.
Put springs.
Yeah, you can buy a kit which comes with springs and shocks, and you can just change out those springs in about 15 minutes.
We did that.
Yeah, we did it here. We've done it
I
several
did it
times.
in my personal life before I come here, but.
Yeah, and I've done it on my dad's vehicle, and we did it on Alice's. It's Lincoln out here. It had air suspension when it came new. The black Crown Victoria that I bought and all this, it had, we jerk that stuff out, pop them springs under there, and now it's sitting up nice all the way. If the air ride, if the sensor doesn't always see what it wants to see, it may turn on the air ride suspension light, and it's gonna turn it on when you turn it off. But what happens when you go to raise the car up on the, like if you were raising this car up on the lift and you didn't turn off the air ride, what would happen? What happens when you raise it up? The axle drops. The ride height sensor stretches out. And it says, my goodness, we're riding way too high, and it lets all the air out of the airbags. And then when you let it back down, it says squats all the way down, you can't get the lift out from under it. And then all the other mechanics in the shop go, oh, you dummy, you didn't turn off your air ride. It makes you look bad because, you gotta, open, close the door or whatever, crank the air compressor, the little compressor under the air cleaner comes on, and it'll pick it back up, but you gotta wait for that. You know what I mean? Because you will not get the lift out from under if it's squatting down on them. We've had that here. I mean, heck, I've done it, Now, I will tell you this, on your expeditions and stuff, the air ride is on the right front. The passenger side, inside there, above the passenger's right front foot is where the air ride is on those expeditions. And Explorers and stuff, they're in different places, it'll tell you where they are. And the Crown Victorias and the Lincoln and stuff, they're in the trunk. Now your GM cars have got a different kind of air ride. I've got a whole article that I wrote on air suspension that I'm gonna make a PowerPoint presentation out of. But anyway, you gotta perform your vehicle pre-checks. Vehicle stability, direct result of vehicle system, suspension, wheels, steering, bearings, and tires operating together. Everything's gotta be right. You know what I mean? Okay, the best alignment system will never be able to compensate for damaged or worn components. So, the first thing you're supposed to do when you're getting ready to do an alignment on a vehicle you hadn't looked at before is you gotta get under there and see if anything wore out.
Ball joints, tire rod ends.
Ball joints,
those are
tie rod
commons.
ends, see if anything's bent, see if anything is
Collision
obviously
damage.
damaged and all that. And then, because sometimes you're gonna have obvious damage. Depending on the step that we're following, some of the pre-checks may have already been performed. Does anybody here know what a dry park check is? That's a word you probably never heard before in there, a term. It comes out of some of the textbooks. Basically, and now some of you guys have even done this maybe. Let's say that you've got some kind of looseness in your steering. Okay, how are you gonna find out what's loose and wore out under there unless you lay under there with a flashlight or with a left light where you can see and have somebody get in the car and move the steering wheel to see where the looseness is. See what I mean? That's smart as all get out. So you just lay under there. That's one of the first things I learned when I first started working on vehicles. I was working at a gas station in the 70s, and one of the first things they do, we'd get out on a creeper and get up under the car and have somebody turn the wheels back and forth to see what was wore out. They say, well, we gotta put an idler arm on there, and that, that drag link's wore out, so on and so forth. But basically, if somebody says I got too much play on my steering wheel, it's either gonna be typically in the steering box. They had an old rag joint down there on some of them that would wear out.
The gearbox.
Huh?
The steering
Yeah,
gearbox.
the steering gearbox, well, the rag joint's between the steering column and the gearbox, but the steering gearbox can have be worn out, or where you can adjust it. If you adjust it, now that's something y'all are gonna do too in here, there's a worksheet comes out on that. If you go too deep in there with that steering, that adjustment, you'll have a hard spot in the middle and it'll dart. So you gotta make sure that you get rid of all the slump. If the steering box is worn out, you may need to replace it. You can get a rebuilt steering box usually for $125, even from the dealer, a lot of them. And that's the steering box. Now, you don't have that kind of adjustment on rack and pinion, not really. On ground pre-checks, if you're looking at the tires with it on the ground, if you got this, what is this right here? Rapid shoulder wear, what's that? What causes that?
Too much hair?
Well, yes, not really. Rapid shoulder wear is typically not enough air.
Oh.
I
was thinking about this.
Yeah, that one right there. This right here with rapid center wear, if you got too much air in there. And then you got cracked threads, you got wear on one side, that'll be like the camber, or, can do it with toe. And this is typically gonna be a toe thing, if it's got a feathered edge. and all that, and there's ball spots, you know, like scallops wear and all that. Scalloped wear is typically, and there's a bunch of things that can cause it, but it'll be shimmying a lot. You know, when you're driving down the road with a shimmying.
What about wear from bad shocks?
Well, I don't know that I've ever seen bad shocks cause tires to wear. I mean, I could be wrong, somebody may shoot me down on that, but I can never actually say bad, unless the shocks are so bad that it's making it
Bounce?
and that would be just like not having shocks. You know, it could do that, I guess. And if you've got one that bounces a lot, you can have bald spots there. Also, what if somebody had a panic stop where they locked the wheels up on one without any lock brakes and slid about 50 or 60 yards? You know, you're gonna have some tread there, you know. You can also, you know, out around tires, you know what I mean. But anyway, they should be done all right. Check all 4 tires for correct air pressure. If you're doing your final exam and steering and suspension, and I have you pull a car up over there to do that, and you don't check the air pressure first, you're gonna get smacked for some heavy points. You check the air pressure in the tires first. Now these guys right here had a really short learning curve on that car they worked on, because they drove that car, they did an alignment on that Taurus, you remember that? And that Taurus, they did the alignment, they were really careful about the alignment, and they drove it, and what did we do? We did something, we replaced some parts, and then whenever what happened was, after we did the work on it, it pulled really bad, because we had to replace some wore out part, whatever they were. I don't remember what did we replace on that darn thing, we put something on it. But anyway, the long and short of it was, when they drove it, it was pulling off to the left really, really bad. I mean, just going off to the left side of the road. And I knew the alignment was okay and all the other stuff was good, so I said, swap the tires. So they swapped the tires, and then it was pulling off the other way. So they had a bad tire. It didn't look bad. A lot of times the tire won't even look bad, and it'll still cause a pull. And sometimes you'll have a noise. Here's something else. Be careful about this. If somebody drives long enough on a car with front wheel drive on it, and they don't get the tires rotated, and it goes and goes and goes and goes and goes a long time without rotating the tires, it starts wearing them in a peculiar fashion on the rear. And then when you rotate the tires, it sounds like you got tractor tread going down the road. And the only way you can fix it is either replace the tires or put them back where they were. Because if you wait too long, I mean, it's just makes a horrible racket in noisy tires, you know, because of the ones that you put on. Anyway, uniform wear patterns. If they're worn odd, you know, like if they're worn out screwball, you need to be aware of that. Look at that before you go in there. You just go in there and do an alignment without looking at any of this stuff, you may wind up getting bit in the finny. Correct size and profile. What if you've got 4 mismatched tires on it? I mean, 4 different size tires, or tires that are, you know, the wrong size, you know, from front, or tires that are just the wrong size altogether. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit off, but you know, of course, some people put different size tires on just because, but if they're all mismatched and everything, if they're on the end where the differential is, the gears are working their fanny off because one tire is bigger than the other one. You know, these differential gears right here that are supposed to let you go one tire roll faster than the other. When you want to curve, those go wacky. We have abnormal wear patterns, you know, and all that kind of thing. Now, my wife took her car one time over to the tire store, you know, where Mike was over there, and he was really confused because both of the tires on the right side were worn evenly, but they were worn completely out. And the ones on the left side looked really good. And he was scratching his head about that. Well, what was funny about that was, you know, whenever you pull up there on the paint stripe and you go to take off, my wife kind of takes off kind of aggressively, and she just burned the tire, taking off, and she'd wear that right front tire out, and then I'd rotate the tires and to put the right, you know, the one from the back on that. I just did it back to front. But basically she had worn off both the tires on the right side of the car. And tires that are over 6 years old don't need to be used. We're going to talk about that on a different presentation. Sheet metal repair would mean that if you see that body work has been done and somebody's bringing it for a lineup, I don't know at the times that the front end man that worked next to me over at the Ford dealership, I was doing drivability and electronics and all, and the front end lift was right next to my 2 service bays in those days. And the body shop would do body work on a car, and then they would bring it around to get it lined up. And the alignment guy, Eddie, would say, it won't line up. He couldn't get the adjustments. And they would want him to tell them what they were supposed to do to make it where it would line up. Well, see, they eventually got a Continental frame straightener so that they could fix all that. And one day in the body shop, there was a guy named Robert, not you, and he was going to get in the trunk of this car. Here's a little story I'm going to tell you to wake everybody up. he was gonna get in the trunk of this car and with a flashlight while somebody wet it with the, there were no cell phones in those days either, by the way. Somebody wet it with the hose, and he's gonna shine a light in there to see where it was leaking, cause it was getting water in the trunk, right? And so he's in there, and, this guy's wetting the thing with the hose and all that, and somebody says, "Hey Joe, you got a phone call over here at the office." He goes, "Okay, hey, I'll be back in a minute, Robert." So he goes over here and he's on the phone. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. He talks a little while, Robert's waiting in the trunk, blah, blah, blah. Oh man, it's time to go to lunch. He goes to lunch, leaves Robert in the trunk of the car for an hour and a half. Robert's sitting there going, let me out, you know. He's in there for a long time. Finally they let him out, he didn't die or anything, but that was funny. Vehicle attitude for evidence of overload or sagging. If you've got a broke spring or a weak spring or something like that, and one side of the car is sitting lower than the other, or they got the trunk loaded with copper wire, you know what I'm saying? There's all kinds of stuff you gotta. Optional suspension equipment, heavy duty handling or trailer tow. If somebody has changed the suspension up, you know, and then they want you to come back and align it so it'll ride like a brand new car, you know, if they got, sometimes you'll have shock absorbers that people will buy from the parts store that will be stiffer than the factory shocks and it'll give them a harsh ride. And they'll think that's an alignment issue. All right, putting it on the lift. Now this is pretty cool. Look at that. That's a homemade rig. How you like that homemade rig? This guy right here got carpenter's levels, and he put a block on each end there, and he actually hooked it to the tire right there like that. Carpenter's level with a short laser level, and you know you can come up if you understand wheel alignment good enough to do something like that, to do a alignment, you know what's going on. See, center the vehicle on the alignment rack. The vehicle's got to be centered to achieve the proper alignment readings. It's not a, you know, when you pull it up on the alignment rack, be careful to make sure your turn plate, you know, is moved in front of the tire and all that. Sometimes, you know, driving it up on that thing is a little tricky if you're not careful. Also, everybody needs to be able to get a stick shift, you know, like the little Escort, and drive it up on there without driving it off into the front end lift. Okay, all right, we'll do that. If you can't drive a stick, you better be getting on that. You know, because what's really embarrassing is whenever somebody goes to work at a dealership and they can't drive a stick. They know how to do everything else, but they can't drive a stick. And then they're sitting here saying, oh no, they've given me one that's got a stick and now I got to pull it up on the lift. And now they got to be embarrassed and go say, I can't drive a stick. You know, yep. That's bad news, isn't it? All right. Make sure it's directly over the center of the slip plates and the turn angle. If the wheels are not in the middle of the turn angle gauges, they won't turn effectively and perform the caster swing. All right. Now then, on hoist pre-jump, raise the vehicle off the floor. Now you're going to grasp the upper and lower surface of the tire, rock the front wheel this way and that way, and see if you got slop, because you're looking for all kinds of stuff. Hello. Hey.
I started $10.
Outstanding. Best way to do it. Yep. That's, absolutely. Bring it on over here.
You were doing that right.
All right, so grasp the side. I gotta put tires on that Lincoln after lunch, by the way. Okay, grasp side to side 3 and 9 o'clock surfaces of the tire and rock each wheel in and out. And if they shake from side to side, who is this person? All right, let me see who this is. Hello. Hey, Derek. Derek, let me get finished with my class here, and I'll talk to you in about 10 minutes. That's one of my mechanics over there. All right, now we got here. Now, so if you do this and you do that, you're going to feel something for something loose. When it's loose, you're going to do this and let your buddy look, or you're going to see if it's an inner tie rod in or an outer tie rod in. If you're doing it like this, see if it's a bearing or if it's a ball joint, whatever. Really important. All right, check for loose suspension and steering nuts and bolts. There was a lady one time that came over here on a little old Ford Fusion, and she had bought it at some other make of a dealer. It wasn't a Ford dealer, it was some other dealer. And she said, I'm hearing a noise, and they said, we don't work on no Fords, you need to get on out of here with your bad self. And so, you know, she actually bought the car from them. She brought it over here, and one of the control arm bolts was almost out of that thing. And every time the control arm would move, that bolt would work out a little more, and it was almost out when she got here. If it had come out while she was driving it, you know what I'm saying? And it wasn't difficult, even for the people at that particular dealership, to look under there and see that bolt out, put it back in, tighten it up. I mean, that was, wow, scary as all get out. Broken, I don't know, other times I've seen ball joints, I mean, a tire rod ends and ball joints just come apart in the parking lot. If it happened going down the road, you know it's Katie barred the door. All right. Leaking or damaged shock absorbers. If you see oil running down the shock, you know you need to put some shock on it. Steering shaft, U-joints, boots for rips, cuts, leaks. Check for drag and brakes. If your brakes ain't right, take your little FLIR camera, put it on your phone, see if one of the brakes is hotter than the rest of them. All right, ride heights, log out suspension measurement from unsprung components. What's an unsprung component? Something that's not riding on the springs. Tire, lower control arm, this kind of thing, right? Don't confuse ride height with trim height. Trim height is how level the body looks and is measured from the vehicle body to the ground. Alignment specs are all set with them at a predetermined ride height. And so refer to the illustrations. The illustration, it'll tell you on the alignment sheet what, you know, where you're gonna do that. Make sure the sensors are on the wheel. Don't drop the sensors. Use the rubber bungee straps. Perform the run out compensation. It accounts for how you've got this thing mounted on the tire. Also, if the tire is a little out, it actually will be able to tell when you roll it back and forth, you know, the 45-degree thing. After you compensate, remove the locking pins from the slip plates. I like to remove it to start with. If the vehicle suspension hasn't settled after being raised, it's gonna cause incorrect measurement. So you bounce it. Make sure everything's where it ought to be. Let me show you a trick right here. Watch this. I'm gonna take this off, I'm gonna put it back on. All right. Now, if you watch him for a few minutes, he's gonna fix that hat, because it don't look right. See, you can't stand it. You know, you can't stand it with something, but you gotta make sure it's where it wants to be. Now, okay, that's how you're gonna do that. Position your lock mechanism on the brake pedal. We gotta move on here. Be sure the caster swing's executed from the steering wheel. You guys are good about that. I've seen you get in the car and you turn it back and forth. A lot of the front end mechanics will turn it with the wheels. You know, it's a whole lot more accurate if you do it, or I mean, in my estimation, and the, you know, the manufacturers on most alignment system, you know, you're gonna see these numbers here. If a measurement is within specs, don't bother to adjust it. The only time you ought to be making it is when the adjustment's out of specs, or the side-to-side difference is great enough to cause a pull or a wear pattern. In other words, if the tires are wearing good and it's not pulling, you don't need to, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That sort of thing like that. Sometimes people just want to check. Caster readings are not live measurements, okay? All right, make the adjustments. Caster and camber ought to be adjusted first and toe last. That's because adjusted toe does not change caster or camber, but adjusting caster and camber will change toe. That's a sort of a general rule.
Is there is machines that do live adjustments, right?
On caster, no. You gotta turn your wheels back and forth to get a new caster. It'll make it look like a live adjustment, but whenever you actually recheck it, it's gonna be a little different.
So Jonathan Price told me some bad information 2 nights ago.
Yeah, well, if there's one that'll do a live adjustment on caster, I don't know about it. You know what I'm saying? Now a lot of times, Jonathan, bless his heart, I mean, I think he's making a couple of $1,000s a week now, so maybe I shouldn't talk ugly about him, you know.
I seen him in Walmart 2 days ago, and he was
Yeah.
telling me the machine he had did
Yeah,
live
well, they may
adjustments.
have a new one that I don't know about, but I mean, I've never known of anything, of a caster adjustment that could be made live. This one looks like it's live. Have you ever noticed that when you're adjusting caster on this one, it looks like a live adjustment? When you go back and do a sweep, it's still different and all that, so maybe maybe there's one I don't know about. Now, you do the rear adjustment before the front. You see this toe adjustment point and a camber adjusting point? This is gonna be on the front, and that's gonna be on the bottom. In other words, that's going to the bottom, this is going to go to the front of that spindle and all that. Whenever possible, adjust the rear first. It'll be on the front wheel drive vehicles. And some of them will actually have a little turnbuckle thing for adjusting on the back too, you know. And you can actually get, a lot of the times you can buy stuff to do an alignment on something where there's no alignment possible. If you got weak springs, you're basically going to have some camber issues. You may have to replace the springs. But you can take an offset bolt here and put it in there, and actually if you change that attitude of that, you obviously see how your camber is going to go back and forth as you change that. Sometimes they'll have you egg shape that, elongate those holes, where you can just pull it in and out and then tighten it up. That works too. But only use the bolts that are designated. Don't go over to the grinder and grind them off and think you're going to be aight. You know what I'm saying? Or get any bolts enough. If the hole's not egg shaped, you can sometimes egg the holes on there and put the original bolt back in there. That's a little review on camber. See that right? The positive camber is leaning out, negative camber is leaning in. This right here is a review on caster. That's positive caster, that's neutral caster, which is kind of like you'd have on one without power steering. You can see how this would turn easier than that. And negative caster, which will make it squirrely as all I'm going down the road. You get far enough this way though, you can have a shimmy, you know, so we watch out for that. You got elongated holes, you got eccentric cams, you got shim packs, and some of these, it's got the I-beam, like on a Ford, have got offset bushings that you take out of there and you replace the bushing on all that. You'll have a toe adjustment here, that's what that looks like, you loosen that up, you turn this, you take that clamp off there so it's not twisting that boot up. Moving and there's your eccentric cam. I love the way Toyota and some of them nowadays will have the caster and camber adjustments with cams on the lower control arms. Really, really, really handy. Whole lot better than what they ever used to have. And look at this, who's these two guys? Look at that, so struts on some cars, you gotta adjust the caster and camber using these slots. That's what we did. We had to actually drill that out and fix that. See that? Loosen the 3 nuts, and we had to drill out all those spot welds, and these guys right here work their fannies off on that job.
That was a hard job, right?
Yeah, it was tough, and that's what it kinda looks like on that. I knew y'all get a kick out of seeing yourselves up there. All right, some vehicles with struts adjust caster and camber. This right here is actually a tool that you can get for drilling out spot welds, but it's a pain in some cases to try to use that. Shim style caster and camber adjustments, you add shims here, leave these alone, this is gonna go that way. Add shims here, leave that alone, that's gonna go that way. The way the ball joints are in relation to each other is what's gonna change your caster. You know, as far as forward, back, and in and out would be your camber. If you put both of them the same, that's gonna change your camber. If you just change one, that's gonna change your caster. And that's what they look like down there whenever you're doing that. Some trucks use a service adjuster bushing to change caster and camber, that's what that looks like. And so you're adjusting your toe is really simple, nothing to that. There's your steering wheel holder. Sometimes it'll look like that, and you know, you hold the tie rod in while loosening the nuts. You know, this right here, there's this on a rack and pinion, I showed you that a little bit earlier, and that's not a big deal. Now understand the adjustment. See, this guy right here, he basically bungeed this piece of wood around his tire, and then he used a tape measure on the front and the back, and when he was adjusting his toe, he made them where they were both all the same. See what I mean? He used a piece of wood and 2 tape measures. And you can do that and get away with it, you know, and I've known of people, I knew of one guy who lined his up with a yardstick. Okay? Make sure the steering wheel's not crooked, okay? Because this is terrible. And you may think, hey, I'm all done with this job. You drive down the road and it looks like that. Go on back, put it back up there, get it straightened out. Don't need that. Anybody got any questions, comments? Is this gonna help you pass your ASE test? If it don't, it ought to, that's all I got to say. There was a guy that sent me an email yesterday that said he really enjoyed the one on brakes because he said gonna have to take his ASE on brakes, and he thought that'd help him. The best time to take your ASE test is whenever you're fresh. You know what I mean? All right. All right. That's the end of the class.